Hello, hello. Hi, guys. Sorry for the delay. Just had some technical difficulties we needed to get sorted out. Give it a couple more minutes to see if anybody else trickles in. And we've got a couple people here in person as well. So it's going to be a little bit different than normal. Recording, great. This is the Halloween herb magic class. Again, Halloween herb magic. So if you came for flying ointment, this is not that class. That's in a couple of weeks. Looks like everybody can hear me. This is going to be recorded. It will be available afterwards as well. I'll give you guys the link to the recording. If you guys want the recording link too, I can send it to you if you leave your email at the end. And everybody should have the PDF handouts. I believe I sent those all out via email already to like everybody that I had an email address for. If you're here from Patreon, this should have been posted on the feed. If anyone doesn't have it, I will provide it for you guys. Just gonna maybe try and screen share it. Like this lovely close-up of my face. Okay, so here is the handout that I'm going to be using. Got a couple more people connecting to audio. I'll try and get this. Remember to keep scrolling as I'm talking. All right, so Halloween herb magic. So there are a lot of different reasons to do magic at Halloween time. It's just known as being a very kind of powerful and highly energetic time of the year as far as being able to connect to the spirit world and the other world. Tapping into our psychic abilities. It is a time for divination, communicating with spirits. So traditionally, it was very much about honoring the dead and ancestors and kind of a feast for the deceased. So like everybody that had passed on in the entire year leading up to prior was kind of celebrated and honored during the Feast of the Dead. And so they were believed to kind of stick around and be here on Earth and be able to influence the lives of the living and kind of stop in and check in on their loved ones that they had left behind during that next year. And then on Samhain, when the veils were thin, they would be able to cross over and go to the afterlife. So I called it Halloween herb magic just because I use the terms interchangeably. Halloween versus Samhain. Not everybody celebrates Halloween, not everybody celebrates Samhain. They are both very similar. So I kind of bounce back and forth. Like, typically, I throw the word Halloween around more so when I'm talking about like kind of just the general time of the year, or if I'm doing like a Halloween collection or something that's more like commercial, I guess I use the Halloween word. But then Samhain is more so for, you know, the sacred, like private, personal stuff that I would do that time of year. So outwardly, I'm like putting out pumpkins and dressing up in all kinds of costumes and just being like crazy and silly and letting my witch flag fly. But it is kind of a somber, reverent sort of time of year to honor the dead. So Samhain, not Samhain, comes from the ancient Celtic Feast of the Dead. So it does mark the end of the year, the end of the growing cycle for people in the Northern Hemisphere. So this would have been a time of the last harvest. So everything is kind of dying, sending out its seeds. Everything's being harvested. All of the wheat and barley and things like that are being cut down. So that's very kind of symbolic, that whole cutting down of the grain with the scythe being connected to Saturn, who rules the dead and rules like everything dark and spooky. So it's kind of a time of sacrifice. If we look at like agricultural traditions, people that work really, really closely with the land, the folkloric traditions, this is like the final harvest before winter. So putting like everything away in the stores to keep everybody through the winter, to ensure everybody's survival. Leaves turning red. We've got like the color of blood is everywhere. Also, in addition to that, it's the time of year typically when animals are slaughtered. So just for agricultural people, it's a very, very kind of death and sacrifice time of year. So making different offerings, giving thanks for the different harvests that have happened throughout the seasons. Because we've got the first harvest, which kind of falls on the summer solstice, so like midsummer night, when you would collect like all of your blooming flowers and make all of your flower essences and things like that. Some of the more like ethereal types of formulas being created on the summer solstice. And then you've got the fall equinox, which is kind of the second harvest. So things are starting to fruit, a little bit more kind of going into the season. And then with Samhain, we kind of wrap all of it up. And after that, everything's dead, everything's done. So it is mainly a celebration of death, transformation, ancestral veneration, and a celebration of life. So wherever we find death, we find life, which is its opposite. We can't have one without the other, just like we can't have darkness without light. So they're really just two ends of the same flashlight pointing in two different directions. You see the light coming from one way because it's aimed in that direction, but if you look at it from behind where the light is coming from, you're not going to see it. So light and dark are very much two things. It is kind of an in-between day. We think about like the fall equinox being the balance between light and dark, with the days being the same length and sunset and sunrise happening at the same time. It creates kind of an energetic gateway, with the equinoxes being more about balance. Fall being sort of shifting into that darker time of year where the balance kind of shifts in favor of the darkness. So those more occult themes, themes that would maybe be termed dark or spooky or spiritual or witchy. Those are all things that correlate to this time of year. And that has to do with, just the energetics of the day itself. It is one of the 8 high holy days of most pagan practitioners, most witches that follow the wheel of the year. So Samhain is actually completely opposite from Beltane, which would be April 31st or May 1st, which is also seen as kind of like the highest of the witchy holidays. So we've got Yule, that's more for like the northern tradition, heathenry and things like that. We all get our Yule goats out for Yule time and pretend to be Vikings. But for Halloween, the basis for Halloween celebrations really come from this sort of feast of Samhain, which we see in different forms throughout the British Isles. So everything from wearing a mask and dressing up in a costume, which was originally called guising, to the carving and lighting of jack-o'-lanterns, trick-or-treating, all of that have roots in sort of the Samhain traditions of the British Isles. And it is observed similarly in other parts of the world. So there are some holidays that fall around the same time of year, but we won't get into like other hemispheres, and it's like springtime in the southern hemisphere and fall up here. Kind of throws everything off a little bit. So they're not always going to fall on the exact same time of year. There are some festivals that are, about the dead, about, remembering ancestors that occur, throughout the year. Some different examples I've got from Catholic being All Souls Day, Dia de los Muertos. We have the Figueres in Haiti, which will be like a voodoo, Halloween, Hungry Ghosts in China, and the Bon Festival in Japan. So a lot of these festivals too will actually have traditions kind of built around exhuming the dead, changing their vestments, their wrappings and things like that, bringing them out and actually viewing them and having that really, really close contact with death and the dead. And part of it is for that ancestral connection, but then it can also kind of be to help with the mourning process. So in like modern Western society, when one of our relatives or loved ones dies, we generally like don't see them or don't have any contact with them until they're already like all drained and prepared and not looking like they really did. So it can kind of throw a lot of people off, not getting that closure and not really having like that close, intimate contact with death, like people in other cultures that do. So death and the dead are celebrated, especially in cultures with strong ancestral connections. So because of all of that, because of the ancestral associations, because of the connection to sacrifice and death, and also it being astrologically a powerful day of the year, it's going to be a very powerful time for any sort of divination, any sort of spirit communication, otherworld travel, and of course, necromancy. So all of these are going to be kind of heightened during this time of year. It doesn't have to always revolve around with, specifically working with the dead for necromancy or for divination, or for something having to do with Samhain, which we'll talk about a little bit later. There are all sorts of different reasons that you could work with the dead. And graveyard magic is actually extremely versatile. So it doesn't always have to be about like death, decay, and the spooky sort of thing. So the word necromancy, it comes from the ancient Greek word necromanteia, which literally means divination with the dead or with the spirits of the dead. So in the ancient world, this would have generally been divination using some type of an oracular skull. So you take the skull of unimportant dead person, honored dead, a patron of the family or something like that, and they would go through different ritual preparations to create this oracle that would then be kept in the home and asked questions during certain times of year. I think there's even a mention of like a talking oracle type of head like in the Bible, but don't quote me on that because my Bible skills are a little rusty. But talking oracular heads are definitely a thing historically. So it is very much about divination. This could be divination to determine who your lover is going to be. We have a lot of kind of love divination type traditions that come out of like England and that part of the country, as far as like bob for apples and then eat the apple. And then when you go to sleep at night, like you're going to have a dream of the person that you're going to fall in love with, that sort of thing. So a lot of that Victorian divination that's connected to Halloween and the dark time of year is very much like love divination, people finding out like who their soulmate is, sort of thing. So in addition to just general memorial rites that honor the dead, they can also be focused on a specific purpose. So if you're petitioning them, asking them for something specific, asking them for help in a specific situation, or trying to get some type of advice, you know, we can go a little bit beyond just like setting up an ancestral altar and lighting candles, you know, sort of in remembrance, where you're actually like interacting with the spirits of the dead and getting something in return. And that includes asking for protection and blessing, and just connecting to kind of your ancestral current for healing. We have a lot of sort of things that we're working through, sort of life themes that we carry with us that are connected to our ancestors and who they were throughout life, and just the different ideas that they had or things that they shared with us that kind of affected us and got transferred. And, you know, so there can sometimes be a lot of bullshit that needs, you know, sort of sloughed off, where you can actually realize like, okay, this is stuff that my family told me, stuff that they believe to be true, but that I don't necessarily identify with or believe. So kind of unraveling some of that ancestral trauma or breaking ancestral attachments. So maybe you have an ancestor that you didn't have the best relationship, and it could be like your dad. My dad sucked, so I know like we're not going to have a great relationship when he dies. We didn't when he was alive, so not a great guy. But there's still like an energetic attachment there. You know, you have any type of like intense emotions towards somebody, there's going to be a connection. So working kind of with those other ancestral spirits, or with that spirit in particular. Sometimes people are a little bit more agreeable after they're dead, a little bit easier to approach if they were not that great in life. So we can do it for that reason as well. So just some basic tips in general for working with the dead. It's kind of some general etiquette things. So protection beforehand is obviously going to be the most important. So wearing protective talismans, saying a prayer, reading an incantation, applying different like protective anointing oils and things like that. And then also cleansing before and after. So cleansing is a separate thing from protection. So you do like a smudging or burning incense or something like that beforehand, just to raise your vibration, because you're going to attract spirits that you have a similar vibration to you. So if you're in a really low vibration, angry, in pain sort of place, you're going to attract a lot of angry spirits that are in pain. So raising your vibration beforehand, kind of a spiritual purification, and then doing it again at the end just to get anything that might have got stuck to you off. And this is going to be like especially for going into the graveyard, and actually approaching and working with the dead kind of on their own terms. So cleansing before and after, and I have in parentheses, it's just like taking a shower before you visit your living relatives. So it's just polite. So typically the cleansing would be done first. I know I said protection first, but then I mentioned protection circle after cleansing. So the cleansing gets all of the stuff off. It raises the vibration. You want to get all of it out and then do your protective circle. So you don't want to cleanse yourself or, you know, protect yourself and then try and cleanse. And now you've got this energetic bubble around you that's holding all of this crap in. So just kind of thinking of things like logically like that. A protective circle is also really important. So every type of spirit summoning ritual ever recorded, in any kind of grimoire or ancient tablet or manuscript or what have you, there's some type of a physical boundary that's laid. And that's really, really important. Doesn't have to be a circle, it could be a square, it could be a triangle, it could be a line. You can get really intricate with it and use some of the different seals and things from the Solomonic grimoires and things like that. But essentially, the physical boundary just sends the message and states clearly, like, this is your space and this is my space. And typically, working within, the occult and magical, spiritual realm of things, everything plays by those rules. It's kind of like occult physics. So like a line of chalk is not going to keep a bus from hitting you because buses are physical things and it just wouldn't work. But when we talk about spiritual things, kind of creating that subconscious boundary, that energetic boundary can be a big benefit, and kind of keeping them in a separate space. So you've got your own circle over here for you, and then you've got separate circle or summoning triangle, or maybe it's like a crystal ball or vessel or something that you're bringing that entity into so that it's contained. Incense and other offerings are important. So not only smudging, not only burning, like cleansing and banishing herbs, because some of those can actually piss the spirits off because they essentially sterilize the room of all energy, leaving kind of a dead zone, and nobody likes that. So leaving some kind of offering or burning some kind of incense, sort of during the summoning or manifestation process. Traditional offerings would be things like tobacco, honey, alcohol, cigarettes. If you know the person, it could be just anything that they liked or something that represents them. But you want it to be something that's pleasing to the spirits. So you want them to be happy, when they show up and see you. So like Aunt Beth, she's just like, she's been dead for 30 years. She just traversed like this whole cosmic bus route to get here. And then she shows up and you don't have anything for her. Or she shows up and your home smells like ammonia because you literally just like bombed the place for roaches or something. It's not going to be as happy. So do something nice. Same thing for visiting the cemetery. I always bring things to give them, offerings, different things like that, whether or not I'm taking anything back with me or not. So just nice to kind of get into the habit of giving things and showing up for the spirit world without asking for things all the time. So like I mentioned, the manifestation or focal point. This could also be like a more complicated communication device if you get into like EMF detectors or the voice phenomenon thing, or all of the assorted spirit communication technology. Traditional manifestation points would be a mirror, a crystal sphere, a candle. And it could also be like its own separate kind of incense brazier. So certain incenses are specifically meant for spirit manifestation. And that's because they either have like psychoactive effects or they produce just like a really thick, white, billowy smoke that is helpful for the spirits to kind of graft onto you. Probably the most important thing to remember is be respectful and be direct. So you have to approach them from a place of respect, not a place of fear. If you're fearful of the spirit that you're trying to connect with, you really shouldn't be trying to connect with them. Because again, that's a very low vibration emotion. So you're probably not even going to get the spirit that you're trying to. You're going to get some nasty, low-level thing that's feeding off of your fear and pretending to be this person that you care about or whoever you're trying to get a hold of to help you. One way to kind of give them like a password or determine if who you're talking to is who you think they are, asking them something only they would know. So this could just be like any random detail from their life, like what was your favorite color, what was your dog's name, depending on how good you are at this and channeling intuitive. It may come through as like a flash of insight or kind of like an audible thing that you actually hear. But easiest way is going to have some other kind of like divination tool with you, like a pendulum or like tarot cards or some kind of medium for them to kind of communicate through that. But just being direct, tell them exactly why you've come, why you've contacted them, and what it is that you are either looking for or just what your purpose is. And then again, the most important part, these are all the most important parts. But the closing is probably just as important as the protective circle, because it is essentially another boundary. So this could be something just as simple as like saying thank you, saying goodbye, we're done now. Before dismantling the circles, before you start taking everything apart, before you do all of the cleansing, just giving like that verbal, okay, we're done. Or there are more elaborate chants and things that you could do if you wanted to for a closing ritual, but that's too much for me to write. So the most important thing is that you hang up the phone. One last one is keeping separate tools for working with the dead. I'm just kind of keeping that death energy separate from the other workings that you are pursuing. Also there's going to be, it's a doorway, it's a conduit to specifically the land of the dead. So we just don't want, you want to use it specifically for that. Keep it in a container, keep it somewhere special, keep it on an ancestral altar, some kind of designated place. Because if we start to kind of accumulate like all of this occult accoutrement that we're like not using, not doing anything with, not being reverent of like how we're storing and keeping it, that's when things tend to pick up stuff that you don't want around. So plant magic, necromancy. When you think of plants, the first thing that comes to mind is not normally death, because plants are alive, they grow, they have pretty flowers, they feed us, they heal us, all of that sort of stuff. But plant spirits are one of the easiest, fastest, and probably safest ways to connect with spirits of the dead. So I look at plant spirits as kind of intermediary spirits. They're not human, they're not animal, they're not really alive, they're not really even dead. They're just in between. So they can often act as, I'm gonna call it like an envoy or an ambassador. An ambassador, that's a better word, to kind of connect you to spirits that they are associated with. So maybe you're wanting to work with Hecate or the goddess Hel from the Norse pantheon. One of these sort of kings or queens of the dead, but you don't necessarily want to just show up on their doorstep and start asking questions and things like that. So you would choose a plant spirit or a plant ally that has some of those kind of matching associations. And then through your ritual, in working with them to kind of act as an in-between for the larger spirit that you are wanting to work with. Certain plants are used to summon specific spirits. So if Hecate is ruler of all poisonous plants, specifically things like wolfsbane and henbane, those are of course going to be used in ritual summoning her. They can also be used as offerings, so to kind of entice the spirits that they share an infinity to. And they can also be worked with to enhance the actual perception of them. So this could be something like as subtle as putting you into a relaxed state of mind, to help you access your intuition by lowering your inhibitions. It might be something that helps with your dream recall or the vividness of your dreams. So it could be something more subtle like that. Or you could go to the other end of the spectrum where you're working with more psychoactive plants or entheogens, which in this case is just another different word for psychedelic, but it is a psychedelic that's used within a ritual context. So things like magic mushrooms, cannabis, things that have more of a dramatic and pronounced effect on our brain chemistry have also been used throughout history, and continue to be today to access the spirit world, the other world, and connect with some of those forces and energies. Plants can also be incorporated into anointing oils used for your tools to work with the dead, or kind of in that same vein, incorporated into ritual objects. So maybe you've got like a wand that's made out of like a belladonna branch or a blackthorn branch that you work with to summon the dead or something like that. So using a plant ally that matches that as an anointing oil would be an example. Dyes and inks. So incorporating the plant ally into a pigment that could then be used to create those protective circles or summoning glyphs and things like that, imbuing the actual symbols that you're drawing with the power of the plant spirit, or just using them in altar bowls for adornment, kind of just sitting them out, making like a pretty, basically like a magical occult potpourri, and then that just sort of sits out on the altar, and is something like the same thing as like putting out a plate of food. So they're still getting the energy, the essence, all of the smells. The dead love things that smell good. So putting it out is just sort of an offertory thing to attract those spirits. There's lots of different ways that plants can be associated with the dead, and it is not always as a funerary herb or to summon the dead. So just a few different examples before we get into the actual plants. They can be plants that protect against or get rid of spirits. So often it's a two-way street. If it protects from a thing, it can be used to summon that thing. If it summons the thing, it can be used to banish it. So it does work both ways when it comes to those sorts of things. Of course, spirit communication, manifestation, divination, and perception, necromancy. Could also be plants that are traditionally planted in or commonly found in graveyards. So over the past few thousand years of human tradition, ever since we started to actually bury our dead in cemeteries and put them outside of the city, there are certain plants that tend to grow in those areas and thrive in those areas. Also things that have just kind of stuck as like the traditional thing to have in a graveyard. I've got some examples of those later, but it would be trees like yew or cypress. Spanish moss is a very graveyardy plant, even though it's everywhere, but just kind of shows up anywhere. Or any plant ritually collected from a cemetery. So the plants that grow in the cemetery, they belong to the land of the dead. They're part of the land of the dead, and so they kind of retain that that additional property. So you can see just like some of the flower art that I made. And some of you guys might have seen these online already, but they are just different little wildflowers that I collected from the graveyard, and dried, pressed them, put them in these little floating frames. So aside from any plants like general regular correspondences, if it grows in the cemetery, it automatically has that connection with the dead, and can be worked with for any number of things pertaining to that. So it's traditionally believed that the plants that grew in the cemetery would actually like feed on the energies of death. Even some of the trees, like yew was originally planted in English graveyards because it was believed that the yew would actually send its roots like down into the graves, and it would keep the people in there, keep them from rising from the dead, because zombies were a really big problem in the 1800s. It would keep them from rising from the dead, and then it would also kind of act as like a filter, where the tree would draw off like any kinds of toxins or disease or miasma or any of just like this yucky death energy that was believed to sort of saturate those areas, and negatively affect people. We later found out that a lot of that is more so related to microbiology and bacteria, different little microorganisms that cause disease and things like that. That sort of contagious and infectious quality that death energy was believed to have still kind of retains into those plants just through their proximity, especially plants that grow directly out of graves. So a lot of times you'll get different things that just pop up and they're right on top of someone's grave, so even more kind of focused and concentrated. And you could use kind of the same rules that you use for collecting graveyard dirt when it comes to collecting specific plants from specific places, as far as like getting creative with where the dirt is collected from. Is it just cemetery dirt, or is it from a specific grave? And then whose grave was it? Was it a relative? Somebody that loved you and cared about you and is just going to automatically help you with whatever you ask them? Or did you seek out somebody specific? Did you go to a soldier's grave to protect somebody from an abusive situation? Did you go to a murderer's grave to hex somebody? There's also some really twisted love spells that use graveyard dirt and restless spirits to like torment people into submitting to their pursuer. So that's fun. Other plants associated with the dead, just things that heal grief. Funerary herbs, these can be also flowers used in services, flowers left behind, poisonous plants because they can kill you. And there are also certain trees that are believed to kind of house the spirits of the dead or act as doorways to the spirit world. So lots of different ways that they can be associated. And what I've got over here on the table that you guys aren't probably going to be able to see, or if I had to move this, they're just all of the herbs that we're going to be putting into the different charms that we're making, and then like my graveyard art. So I'll be sending these out to everybody. I'll go back through and see everybody that signed up for the class, make sure I've got everybody's address, send these guys out. So what we're gonna do like essentially is make a couple of different things. If I remember how I split this up. So the little Anza bag, that was the one that I was thinking just for like the potpourri sort of deal that we're going to make. So this is going to be like a more fragrant kind of mixture that you could just sit out. You could use it in offering. You could put it on the altar whatever you really want to do with this, just to kind of go through some of the symbolism and correspondences with the different plants. As I read through the list, there are 13 main herbs of the dead that I'm going over, but they're not all going to be out here, so there's a little bit of different stuff. So we're just filling up these little bags here. The first thing we're going to put in is the chrysanthemum. So this is mum season. So everybody goes and they put their little mums, the orange and pink and yellow. It's like the most popular fall flower. I don't know if that's the case everywhere, but it definitely is here in Indiana. So chrysanthemum is a funerary flower. It's used in burial rituals, altars for the dead, and it's kind of a little bit more about celebrating life. So chrysanthemum symbolizes rebirth, happiness, vitality, remembering our connection to loved ones that never changes. I'll give that to you. And just however much you want, since I got plenty more for everybody online. I wasn't sure who all was going to be here in person. The next one that I've got is Life Everlasting. This is a newer one for me. It's one that I picked out to incorporate into the fall collection. The reason that I did that was it was really kind of an intuitive thing. Obviously, the name Life Everlasting fit my theme of death and Halloween and eternal light and things like that. But it's actually a really awesome medicinal herb too. So Life Everlasting, it's got these like super bright yellow flowers that never lose their color. Thank you. Life Everlasting can be used to contact the spirit world, for psychic healing, for ancestor work, intuition, and of course, eternal life. So I'm going to drink it, soak in it, carry it with me, all of those things. So this was one of those that I just kind of was like, oh, that's got a cute name, I'm going to get it. And then found out it's got all of this useful stuff that pertains to exactly what I was doing. It's also a neuroprotective, cardioprotective, anti-tumor, anti-cancer. It's good for your skin. It's good for your insides, your outsides. It just like keeps everything together, keeps everything lifted, keeps everything moving. So a really awesome tonic herb as well. The next one, thank you, that I brought is elderberry. So elder is a tree, kind of more of a bush, but a tree that is very much associated with death and the other world, the underworld specifically. I think you've all seen like the black elderberries. So I chose the elderberries because they are black, which in sort of the three-tier cosmology of the elder tree, the black berries are what is most connected to like kind of the underworld and the darker side of the plants, spirit medicine, if you will. Elder is a gateway tree. It's a fairy tree. So working with the flowers to connect with celestial spirits or to travel to the upper realm. The wood, of course, would be for middle realm type of workings, working specifically with the dead. And then the black takes on a little bit more of like a darker tone. There were a lot of taboos about elder, as far as like burning the wood, cutting the tree down, bringing the wood inside of your house. It was considered an omen of death. If you slept under it, or if you brought the wood into your home or burned it, somebody close to you would die. On a little interesting side note, burning elder wood also gives off toxic fumes. So that may also be partly due to why it's such a taboo to burn it inside, because it would have suffocated everyone. Something to keep in your back pocket. Then we come to henbane. Oh, and then I don't know why I didn't bring henbane seeds, because I totally had some. But henbane is kind of one of the most like ancient kind of necromantic herbs that there are. So like all of the folklore, all of the mythology, all of the story that we hear about henbane is that it's very much a necromancy type of an herb, going all the way back to ancient Greece and continuing well into like more modern ritual magic, ritual fumigations, working with henbane seeds. So with this one, it is just a Saturnian herb. It's a poisonous plant. So we automatically kind of get that association to death and the spirit world. But henbane is also a psychoactive nightshade. So it is a deliriant. It's not psychedelic, which is a little bit different. Henbane is typically used for summoning spirits, but it's also a really, really awesome herb to work with for scrying. So it's traditionally used in incense, traditionally the seeds, but you can really use the entire plant. And just through inhaling those fumes, it alters your perception enough that you're able to see a lot more. So when you're scrying and you're sitting in like a dark room with just a mirror and a single candle, your eyes are going to be very, very sensitive to any kind of like minor changes in light or shifts, within like the shadow. And henbane really, really enhances that because of the action of the tropane alkaloids. They have a really interesting kind of influence on our pineal gland, as well as our eyesight. And that all has to do with like how we perceive light and how we see things. And so henbane is great for any kind of scrying, any kind of like visionary, looking at something and seeing something else. Gold copal is another one that I added. It is a very important ritual ceremonial resin used throughout Central and South America. It is used in some Dia de los Muertos rituals to honor and please the dead. This is a great example of a cleansing, purifying incense or resin that's going to be pleasing to the dead. So like your sweeter resins, things like copal, Palo Santo, I know is not a resin, but it's got a sweeter smell. Even myrrh. Myrrh kind of has a sweetness to it, also being used in embalming. So these are going to be pleasing scents, or things that are more like antiseptic, sagey, or like really piney. Those are kind of more for like getting things out, getting things moving. The next one I have is dandelion. Now, I typically think of dandelion as like these happy, sunshiny, yellow flowers that pop up everywhere. But it is kind of a baneful herb if you think about it. So it's very much a weed, very unwanted by most people, and kind of gets a bad rap through that. But dandelion has sort of a similar three-part to it that we see with like elder and some other plants, where you can actually work with the three different parts of the dandelion plant to work with the three different levels of the spirit world and the different spirits that reside in those realms. And so of course, the root being the underworld, the leaves and stems being the middle realm, and then the flowers or seeds kind of being the upper realm, or the more celestial spheres of things. Dandelion is going to be very grounding. So it can also be a good thing to have as like a tea after working with spirits. So any kind of like grounding herbs, earthy plants, even just eating something like really salty or heavy, something to ground you back into your body after doing these types of things. Star anise is the next one. This is planted near graves in Asia, ancestral temples. So it's very much associated with ancestral reverence. And the little pods are shaped like stars. We got 1, 2, 3 little hagelas. So yeah, they do have that ancestral association, but with star anise, it's really about increasing the psychic power, increasing intuition. It's used in formulas for dreaming true or second sight, so having visions in your dreams. It's got kind of a licorice scent or flavor to it. So in planetary correspondences, it is associated with the moon. So any kind of psychic working or something having to do with the subconscious is going to be enhanced with the star anise. Another one that is not super spooky or Halloweeny would be rose. Rose is another one that does have kind of a baneful and dark nature to it as well. Of course, going to be good for divination and psychic ability. Rose is helpful for psychic ability, not because it helps you access your intuition or that it does anything to your mind, but it's a very powerful heart medicine. So rose opens up your heart, bringing better empathy, better transmission of information, and things like that. We've also got a lot of symbolism and imagery with rose, from the color to the stems, the thorns. Lots of magical potential with rose. And I do consider rose a plant of the poison path. So it is kind of a baneful plant ally. And then that is a separate class. The next one we come to is mullein. Mullein is one that very commonly grows in graveyards. People will often talk about them being used as hag's tapers or spirit lights, where the mullein stalk is dipped in wax or tallow, some kind of wax, and can be lit and used as a torch for summoning spirits, for divination, for circle boundaries. But it's a very, very common wildflower, grows in most parts of the world. So it can be generally found and collected in graveyards for all sorts of workings with the dead. It is sometimes called graveyard dirt. That's because when the leaves are all ground up, it does kind of look like dirt, but I don't really follow that association, because unless it was ripped out of a graveyard, it doesn't have any of the same properties as graveyard dirt. But I do think the seeds can be used to paralyze fish. So that's an interesting side note with that one. Another great one for working with the dead would be yarrow. So yarrow is an awesome one for all sorts of psychic workings, because it's all about boundaries. So it can be very protective, but it can also help with like letting the right things in, or protecting you from unwanted things, but allowing for your aura, your energetics to be more absorptive. So it helps with kind of the transmission of energy, the protection of energy fields, commonly growing in graveyards. So just read your notes that you wrote for yourself. Another one is monkshood. So monkshood is going to be a poisonous plant. You can sometimes find this growing in graveyards. It's often planted in monastery gardens. Even here in the United States, like you'll see some of the Catholic churches, but like the English churches here in town that will have wolfsbane planted in their gardens. and because it's just a very traditional plant for them to have, but little do they know it's also super useful for us. It is connected to the angel of death. So the Agori, who are shaman in India, are devotees of Shiva. I talk about them in my poison path work and writing because they're kind of the modern poison path practitioners. So they ingest things like cannabis, datura, aconite, to also arsenic, some mineral toxins. They're very much about taboo and connecting with Shiva, who is the god of ecstasy and intoxication and all of these things, to become closer to him. So they'll ingest all of these psychoactive and poisonous plants entheogenically to have a divine experience of their deity, which is very much what the poison path is about. The next, probably most popular, is the apple, which has always been a symbol of the other world, food for the dead and forbidden knowledge. And then we have the yew, which I mentioned earlier. It is commonly planted in graveyards, believed to soak up all of the energy of the dead. In the northern traditions, in Norse runes and Icelandic runes, the death rune is also the yew, or the rune for yew. So that one. That is the death rune. It's this guy right there. Yeah. That symbolizes the yew tree. This is also used in bow and arrows and different weaponry and things like that. Next, I just wrote down a few anti-ghost or ghost get rid of herbs, which would be rosemary, angelica, which is really good for calling in angelic spirits when you need them. Basil, frankincense, rue, juniper, asafoetida, sulfur, salt, wormwood. Not too much to say there. Also protective plants. Essentially any of these could be, everything can be used for protection in one way or another. Purification specifically, things like rue, again, holy basil, sage, vervain. I'm not gonna just read through lists. And then I have some for divination. So I have just some quick cemetery etiquette to finish up with. I'm going to go over a few more little plants. The other ones that I have included that aren't, they're maybe not associated with the dead, but they're definitely associated with this time of year, are cinnamon sticks, nutmeg, and allspice. Here's the little nutmeg. So they're whole nutmegs. They look like little testicles. And then the whole cinnamon sticks. So the reason that these are associated with fall, why we use them this time of year, and why all of our pumpkin pie, apple pie, everything has these like warm, spicy, comforting scents to them, is because they remind us of life. So warmth, heat, like vibrancy, movement, that fragrance, all of those things are things that remind us of life. And that's what we want to bring into the house during the winter time and during like the dark time of year, is bring in that light that is not there, to bring in the warmth that's missing. And that's where these warming, fiery, fragrant kind of plants come in when we work with the dead. The dead oftentimes are nostalgic for life, and they often miss it, and not everybody wants to go, you know, become a homogenous part of consciousness. And so some people like to stick around, and it's probably something that I'm planning on doing. So putting out things that are warm and sweet and energizing, and you know, gifting them with that, so they have a little bit of, you know, something to pull from to do the things that they're needing to do. So you all know that spirits typically pull the warmth or the thermal energy out of a room. So kind of the same idea with warming plants like that. And that's where this next one comes in, that we're going to be adding to our combination. These are just cider spices. So like mulling spices. I don't know if you guys are going to be able to see these. Ah, there they are. So it's red pepper flakes, ginger, turmeric. Very fragrant, very spicy. Like this will clear your sinuses. I wouldn't like mix this up into an incense and burn it or anything or get it in your eyes because it is really spicy. Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Spices like everlasting. The last one that I have with this little guy is the tiny pumpkins. And these are like my favorite thing about this time of year. The tiny pumpkins. We actually got in 3 different colors this year. Last year they were just like different shades of orange. But the tiny pumpkins are actually a seed pod. They're called putka pods, so Putka. And I believe they're like an Ayurvedic or from India sort of thing. But yeah, they're really cute. So we're adding those because it's Halloween. All right. Yeah. Got that one made up. And if you guys want to just like keep it in the organza bag, or if you want to put it in like a different container, or sit it out in a bowl, or dump it out somewhere in offering, totally up to you how you want to work with that. My other thought on that was to, because I do have like a big bowl of it at home that's already mixed up, that you can just like set out all of the dry stuff and then sprinkle like essential oils onto it, and it soaks them up, and then you just get more fragrance, more different things going on that you can kind of re-add things to over the season. Okay, what was the other thing that I had? This was something that I did in one of my other classes. I don't remember what it was, what class it was. So what I have here is rosary pea. These are the pods. And I think a lot of you guys may have seen these before. They've got the little red and black seeds inside of them. So those all grow on a vine. That's native to Florida. So I collected those from the cemetery by my house. That's the cemetery that I typically go to and visit and get everything from because they're really nice there. So rosary pea from the cemetery, growing up a tree that's like right next to a grave. The cool thing about rosary pea, there's a lot of cool things about rosary pea. It's black and red, so it's got Mars and Saturn, kind of the 2 most protective planets that you would want protecting you. Also black and red, think of like a reversal candle, black on the bottom, red on top, or like a return to sender type of a situation. So they are used in return to sender, counter magic, reversal magic. They're commonly called crab's eyes because if you look at them, like they literally look like the creepy little googly eyes that crabs have. And crabs are in Southern folk magic, hoodoo, conjure, crab shells, any part of the crab is used in reversal or counter magic. And that is because the crabs walk side to side, they walk backwards, so to get things moving in a different direction. So there's some interesting things there. The rosary peas are extremely poisonous. So the little red guys, they contain a protein called abrin that actually breaks down, I think it's the cell wall or protein synthesis or something like that. So certain poisonous plants just make you stop breathing or they paralyze you, and it's just kind of like you wait it out, and as long as you survive the symptoms, you'll be okay. But with certain things like this, like wolf's bane, it actually like breaks down things at a cellular level and interrupts cell metabolism and just very, very, very destructive. But they are not poisonous unless you crush them up. So don't put them in your mouth and eat them. In Southern folk magic, or specifically more of the Caribbean traditions, African diasporic traditions, the black and red color is associated with the Orisha Elegua, who is the gatekeeper spirit. He is the one that's petitioned at the beginning of every single ritual. And the reason for that is because he opens up the gates. He's like the operator connecting everybody on the phone. So very much kind of an intermediary ally when it comes to working with the spirit world. And it's also kind of blended in here with some of my henbane incense. But what we're gonna do, what we did was just take like a few pieces of the pods, and then if you can get down in there and get like some of that other stuff too. We're just making like a little charm bag. We got black fabric square. I'm gonna make these for you guys online too. I'm gonna take some of the seed pods, get some of the little red guys, put that all in the middle of your square. The other thing that I had that I'm going to add to it is some wood. So it's almost like powder. It kind of looks like dirt, but this is wood. This was from a tree stump that's right next to my favorite grave in the cemetery that has a rose bush growing out of it. It's got this tree stump right next to it, and like the heart of the tree stump is all like decomposed. So it's like basically like wood powder. So I got that. I'm gonna add some of that to it as well. Good. And then we're just bringing up all the corners, and I'm gonna tie it with the string. And I don't really like put these things together with really super duper like focused intentions for what they are or for what they're supposed to be, because there's a lot of potential, a lot of different correspondences, different things that the different people might resonate with more. Not everybody's trying to do the same kind of magic or work with the same spirits or whatever. So as long as it matches up with the correspondence and makes sense and satisfies you intuitively. And then I brought some Spanish moss too, which has kind of come back to life in the bag because it never loses all of its moisture. So Spanish moss is interesting because it doesn't grow on the ground. So it's not in the cemetery. It's not on the cemetery ground proper, but it's, it's kind of hanging in the tree. So it's a very in-between thing. And very much about like connection, communication, it filters everything, filtering the energy, filtering the air. It typically grows like where the air quality is good. So they filter. They can also be used in like war water, hexing water. Dead. If you want to put that like in that other little black one, though, that'll be fine. That makes sense. Yeah. If anybody has any questions online, if everyone's doing okay, there's just one more little part that I'm going to read to wrap things up. And that's more so specific to the cemetery when you're collecting things. It's kind of the most like widely accepted or general thing that is done is taking 3 coins and going to either the cemetery gate or the largest tree. You're asking for permission to enter from the gatekeeper spirit. So the kind of the land spirit that rules over that part of the cemetery. So leaving those 3 coins at the gate or depositing them on the largest tree just to get that spirit's blessing before you start doing other things. Of course, like I mentioned before, water, tobacco, other biodegradable offerings, so don't litter, don't leave stuff that's not going to decompose. You can bring plastic bags with you. I have that note right after the biodegradable plastic bags, but those are nice, like to keep in your pocket. And then if you need to literally just reach into your pocket and have a plastic bag on your hand and scoop up some graveyard dirt and be gone, then that's nice for quick grabbing and hiding. Because you're not doing anything illegal. As long as you go during normal hours and you're not doing it during a funeral service, nobody's going to say anything to you. People are allowed to go to the cemetery and collect like small amounts of memorabilia, dirt, and things like that. So as long as you're not digging up a grave, don't be too worrisome. Like you might get some weird looks and people will wonder what you're doing, but you're in a graveyard. Like nobody's going to question what you're doing there, who you're visiting, or whether or not you have a reason to be there. Because for all they know, like your whole family could be buried right there and nobody's going to say anything to you unless you're doing something silly. One of my suggestions, if you don't know anybody buried at that specific cemetery, make sure you visit a couple of times before you take anything and pay attention to how you feel. So if you keep going back to this cemetery and you get a really bad headache when you leave, or you start to feel sick or just drained of energy, or it's just not a great experience, maybe you get bad news every time you go there. Those are all signals and messages and things that are trying to be communicated that you shouldn't be there. So it's one thing to like break a taboo and overcome your fear and do a ritual in a graveyard. That's a very powerful, like psychological and spiritual tool. But it's another thing to like ignore all of your instincts and psychic messages and things like that. So if you don't feel good there, pick a different one. Always pay for things that you collect. I generally keep it to like natural objects only. So don't take people's things that have been left on the graves. That's just shitty. There is like a time and place for that, but I'm not even going to go into that because it's not something that I really want to teach people how to do. So don't take things from the graves. I do take the felt flowers. So the ones that like fall off of the little bouquet and they get all like tattered and bleached by the sun, and it's just kind of, it's nostalgic, and somebody that loved somebody put that there for them, and it's very much, it's still connected to that. Also kind of on the other hand, working with helping spirits transition, helping the living with grief, kind of like soothing, all of those sorts of things. Those felt funerary flowers are good for. Just not taking the new ones. Older cemeteries usually have areas that are worn. So like paths and stuff where people have been walking where the dirt's already exposed. So unless you're needing to collect something from a specific grave, from a specific person, it usually makes more sense to just grab dirt from the places where there already is dirt, as opposed to like ripping up the sod or whatever to get beneath it. Leave things in its place. So this could be coins, alcohol, cologne, cigarettes, anything like that. So leaving something in place of whatever it was that you took. Don't look behind you until you've exited the gate. Don't look behind you. So that's a really, really big thing. And that's just kind of another boundary in place. It's another sort of taboo that says, you know, nothing is allowed to follow me home. So just don't do it. Don't look behind you. And then of course, cleansing, like we mentioned earlier, and that's after you've exited. You might want to do it before you get home. You could do it at home. You know, but you know, the dead aren't generally following people home to bother them. And that kind of transitions into the dead are not bad, the dead are not scary, the material that you collect from the cemetery is not bad or dangerous. It's a link to the dead. We're all linked to the dead. And it's just kept in reverence in a safe place. So, you know, having it in your house is not going to bring malefic influence, or you're not going to become haunted or anything like that. And like I mentioned at the beginning, it is one of the most versatile magical ingredients, talking about graveyard dirt or plants collected from the graveyard, that we can use for everything from protection to love magic to help with specific situations, including hexing. Yeah, and it all just depends on what and where the things are collected. Yeah, and I'll just keep repeating myself, I think, after that point. So if anybody has any questions, anybody in person, anybody online, you can type it in the chat if you don't want to unmute yourself. Hopefully everybody could hear me.
Have you ever had any bad experiences?
Just like some uncomfortable experiences, I think, but never anything like bad or where I felt like I was in danger or anything like that. I have had like some like bouts of bad luck that seem to like correlate to going to a specific graveyard. But I think that had to do with like some other factors that were involved too. Yeah. Yeah, thanks for coming, and feel free if you want to look at like the artwork and stuff. These are just like some pendants with the same plant combinations, just some different cemetery herbs and things like that I put together. And thank you guys for attending online. If nobody has any questions, I'm going to stop the recording. And I will get the link out and available to everybody ASAP. All right, I think we are all good. You guys have a great Samhain. Happy Halloween. Feliz el Dia de los Muertos. All of those things. Be nice to the dead and they will be nice to you. Thank you. I'm glad you guys enjoyed it. If anybody has like any further questions or things that they want to talk about regarding this, you can always reach me on social media or shoot me an email at thepoisonersapothecary@gmail.com. Bye. Thank you guys. Those are for you.
Thank you.